Hello Garden Legends. Today I want to show you and talk to you about the classic cottage garden favorite sweet pea, Lathyrus odoratus. For those of you that don't know, it is a flowering plant in the spring, late spring and early summer months. It goes on for weeks and weeks, sometimes even months if looked after well enough. And now is a good time to sow them. A lot of people enjoy sowing them in the autumn months, and some prefer to sow them in spring. I've chosen a slightly different angle this time. I'm sowing them late in December and see how it goes. So I'm going to show you what to do, how to sow them. It's not very difficult at all, but there are just a few basic principles that you do want to think about to promise and to guarantee the most success with these lovely classical plants. First thing to think about when sowing is choosing the container. Now, I'm going to sow them and actually not transplant them. So you can either sow them and then as soon as the plants are big enough, transplant them into a container just to see them through the winter and sort of earlier colder months of spring before you transplant them out into the garden. I don't like to fiddle with them. Sweet peas tend not to like to have their roots disturbed. So I'm going to plant them sort of in their final position before planting them out in the garden later. And so the best thing to do is to try and find a container with as much soil depth as possible. Sweet peas have long roots that enjoy going, far down. So even if you could have a container with double that, almost sort of to that height, that would be fantastic. I do not, so I'm just going to make do with what I have here, and see how it goes. Normally, this is sort of a 9 centimeter pot, so I would optimize, or I would try to have 3 to 5 plants per pot, because some of them obviously won't do as well as the others. If all 5 of them do well, it doesn't matter because sweet peas don't mind being planted out in little groups. So I've got 3 varieties of sweet pea here. One is called Prince of Orange. It's an old-fashioned. I'm hoping it's orange because that's kind of the color scheme I'm going to go for. The next is called Matucana, and for those of you that don't know or have never heard of this variety, it is arguably the best scented variety you can find. It is a classic dark purple sweet pea with sort of a lighter violet lilac outer, and the scent is absolutely heavenly. Matucana is definitely top of my recommendation list. And then the third variety I'm going to be planting is one called Black Knight. So I'm hoping the 3 of them being sort of dark purple with a bit of lilac in it and orange, that combination will work really well together. So I'm going to fill these up. Now, I will just show you the compost I have here in a moment. It's actually garden compost. Normally, I would sort of choose to plant in a normal seedling mix, which is obviously just a fibrous and fine, free-draining, light textured sowing compost. But this one is a little bit more kind of stringy and has a lot of bits and pieces in because it's come from the garden compost heap. The reason I'm doing this is because sweet peas are known to be really hungry plants. So if you can provide them with the best possible compost mix with nutrients and enough water and air from the get-go, they do just establish so much better. So I've never done this before. I've never planted them in garden compost. So I have no clue whether this is going to work. However, I feel confident that it is. And for those of you that haven't seen my videos or my channel before, it's called Blunder and Bloom, or Bloom and Blunder, whichever you prefer to put first. And the reason I'm doing this just as an ordinary gardener is to make mistakes and to learn from them and to go on this journey with you. So please do subscribe if you like this content, and keep watching the channel for more. So I shall fill up a few of these pots. I'm really hoping that this is sufficient in terms of nutrients. If not, the plants will show pretty quickly when they get hungry. And at that stage, you can transplant. But like I said previously, I don't love transplanting sweet peas just because it's a bit of a faff. And they seem to sort of just like to get established and to be left alone. So I'm going to try and get sort of 3 9-centimeter pots per variety. And that should give me plenty of plants. For those of you that are not very experienced seed sowers, no worries. I think a common mistake in the beginning is to sort of over sow. One tends to think you need 100 plants, and then you realize that 80% of them have taken, and then suddenly you're inundated and overwhelmed with a number of seedlings you have to take care of. So I've learned to be a little bit more conservative over the years. I would always say, sow the number that you think you need, and then add 10 or 15% extra just for those situations where the plants die or don't germinate. And so then you don't become too despondent, and you can just absolutely work with what you have. And if you notice that you don't have enough, even if it is 2 or 3 weeks later, just sow a few more. Okay, so I've got 4, 5, 6, 7. So let's do 2 more of this, and then we are good to go. Right, all 9 my pots have now been filled. So the next thing to do is to write labels, because when you start going and you start sort of sowing mixed, it's very easy to get all the varieties confused. So I'm just going to write here SP for sweet pea, and I'm going to write the name of the variety, Prince of Orange. And another tip is to just write the date, because that just gives you an indication weeks down the line whether the seeds haven't taken. But do be patient, especially this time of the year, because we are in the winter months. It is much colder, and I'm going to be placing them in a cold frame, because if you were to put them indoors where it is just that tad too hot, the plants germinate and emerge rather quickly. But then what happens is they grow too quickly as well. And so this time of the year, when light levels are low, the plants tend to grow up very rapidly, and they become quite long and sort of weak stemmed. So it's better to have them germinate in conditions that are slightly cooler. It might take a bit longer, but the plants tend to be a lot more robust, a lot more compact, and overall the plants are just much more healthy. So I need one more variety. It's called Black Knight, and again, just the date. Right, I've done that. I shall move the camera up a little bit so that everyone can see what I'm doing. There you go. Starting with, let's say, Prince of Orange. Another thing that people tend to do is they quite like, as you can see, the seeds are quite big, and so very easy to deal and handle. People quite like to soak them in water overnight. That does speed up the process of germination a little bit, because they're able to take up a lot of water. You will also, if you do a bit more research, find some websites or vlogs or blogs of people speaking about nicking the seeds. I tend not to worry about that at all. It is not necessary. And I think the risk of trying to nick the seeds, if you're not very experienced doing so, is that you actually damage the seed. So I don't even soak them overnight. And I've planted many, many sweet peas in my life, and most of them have done really, really well. And so I just sow them directly as they are. So there you go. Here's my container full of compost. And I'm going to be aiming to do 3 per pot. And just again, as a reminder, I'm going to sow them and I'm going to leave them. So if three emerge successfully after germinating, great. If only 1 does so, also fine. It just means it has more space to grow. And if I need to resow a few weeks down the line, then so be it. It's funny how nature works. At the end of the day, they do just catch up, even if you do sow some of them much later. Right, so that was Prince of Orange done. Happy with that. The next one is my favorite, Matucana. And I'm really, really hoping to have great success with this variety, because it is truly, truly a very rewarding plant. I apologize for all the bird noises in the background. I live in the southwest of England, and so we're not many miles away from the sea. And so you might be surprised to hear seagulls. I certainly remember when we moved here thinking this is not quite the right place for seagulls, but then I realized as the crow flies, we really aren't that far from the coast at all. I'm really excited to see how these plants do in the garden compost because, like I said, I think the nutrient levels will just be such that they really do just take off. Okay, and then the last variety is Black Knight. I'm sure everyone can see what I'm doing. Literally just making 3 little holes and popping each seed. Actually, this seed has a hole in it, so I'm going to discard it. Plant a third one. Not all of them will germinate, of course, but even if you get 60%, 80% of them germinating, you will have a fair few plants with which to work. Right, and the very last pot. And there you have it. 3 varieties, 3 pots each, and 3 seeds in each pot. So if all of them were to germinate successfully, it would mean I have 9 times 3 is 27 individual plants. That would be fantastic. I don't really know if I have the space to plant all 27, but rather a bit too many to start with, and then we can pick and choose which plants grow the best at a later stage. The penultimate step is to just cover the seeds up with a bit more garden compost. You can literally see there are leaves and twigs, so quite rough and rugged, but it will do just fine. And so I'll just cover them up so that the seeds are nice and submerged under the compost, which gives them just that contact with the soil so that it can absorb water. Keeping them in their groups just avoids any mixing of varieties, but also if you aren't too worried about which variety you're planting and how you're planting them and how you're ultimately going to be transplanting them, then it doesn't really matter. So there you have it, covered, labeled, perfectly poised to be watered next. Right, and the last step is just to give them a bit of water with a watering can, just so that the compost settles nicely. The seeds are able to then absorb the water, and slowly they will start germinating and growing until you see the first shoots appear, maybe 2 weeks down the line. And there you have it, sweet peas sown, perfectly timed for their emergence and their growth when the spring commences. Like I said, feel free to plant them in winter. Feel free to plant them in spring if you so prefer, and also in autumn. There really is a big window in which to sow them. I would just say, as a final reminder, the best advice I could give you is to let them germinate in cooler temperatures so that they can grow away slowly, be a little bit more compact, but a lot more robust, rather than growing very quickly, becoming flimsy, and just ultimately having weaker plants if they were to emerge too quickly because of temperature. And that's really all there is. Please let me know in the comments if you are about to sow your sweet peas, or if you have already done so. Let me know if you have had any problems with them, or whether you find them easy and rewarding as I think they should be. And please subscribe to this page if you like the content, and I will definitely do a video down the line on how to care for the plants once they start growing, and give you some useful tips so that you can have the best quality plants to plant out into the garden, ready to give you flowers for weeks and weeks in the summer. And thank you very much for watching, and see you next time. Bye bye.